it's actually a perfect transition into our next topic of someone exiting so well. And once again, I really want to emphasize that we are not judging anyone for these situations. We don't know the whole circumstances. However, we are just drawing some metaphors and some lessons we from an outsider's point of view we can see. But talking about being public figures and what we share to the public, let's talk about Brian Houston, Pastor Brian Houston. Now, it breaks my heart to see what he and his family and Bobby has gone through in the recent months and years and everything like that. And look, once again, we don't know the real stories. We don't know everything that's going on. But there was something a number of months ago that really surprised me. And as soon as I saw it, I actually spoke to you the next week, Dr. Rod, about them. Like, I just don't get this action. Now, we know that he's now stepped back from Hillsong, which must be so heartbreaking to have to step back from an organization that you have founded and seen grow across the planet. But there was one situation with this that now I don't actually spend much time on social media, but I opened up my Instagram one day to go on. I think someone messaged me and I went to open up, and the first message was a post by Pastor Brian Houston with a screenshot of a communication between one of his board members and his wife, Pastor Bobby Houston, about her being, let go from her position there, and then his response. Now, I don't want to talk about the situation because we don't know it, but I want to talk about that act, because that, for me, I turned around instantly to my wife, Noelia, and I said, that is poor leadership. That is bad, airing your dirty laundry. Now, even if there is a problem, we need to be responsible and deal with it behind closed doors. Yes, I agree with you, Dr. Roman. I want to get to this in a moment about like what we do need to share publicly. We have to. But there's certain things we need to keep in private. There's certain things that, because as soon as he did that, my heart sank for the church. And when I say the church, I mean the Christian church as a whole across the nation. Because Hillsong are this, our flagship almost. Like they're pioneers and they're at the forefront. And for them, for their leader to make such a poor decision and a poor public decision to air their dirty laundry, it just paints a bad light against the church as a whole. What was your response to that situation?
Oh dear, this is a tough one. I don't know Brian personally, but I have been at conferences that he's attended and so on. And he just related to people so very well. So my heart really goes out to him, but also to everybody in Hillsong Church, which has had some pretty tough times of late. Things have not gone well for Hillsong in a number of areas. My own view is that it really stems from an issue which we call in the literature span of control. And I think actually Brian's leadership was spread too thinly.
Okay.
And look, I know this is a big issue for senior pastors. And look, the same happens in the corporate world as well. Leaders have to get to the point where they are prepared to take the risk to delegate. And there's a big difference between delegation and direction. When you delegate, what you're really saying is trust you in those shoes. The very first thing I did when this story broke, I actually went to the website of Australia's Commission for Not-for-Profits and Charities. It's called the ACNC here in Australia. And I had a look at all of the Hillsong entities for which there was any information available. And I saw that Brian was actually chairman of multiple boards. And my reaction was, this guy has spread himself too thinly in leadership and has really not done enough delegation. Now, my view is that all of the issues actually go back to that, and that might be too simplistic, but I think the issues go back to that span of control, which was too wide for one person to maintain, and that can lead to all sorts of things. It can lead to stress, and we know that in Brian's case, he was on medication at times. And that's all compounded, of course, in this Pentecostal world. I'm part of it, of course, where we're supposed to be more than conquerors. We're supposed to live in victory. So we tend not to tell people that we've got some issues, that we're stressed, or, we might even be depressed. We don't want to tell people that, because that may be interpreted as some kind of failure of our faith. You know what? We need to accept we're all broken. So that I think is important background. Now, in terms of what we saw on social media, I've seen most of it. I just felt, man, I'd like to get alongside this guy and just, comfort him and strengthen him, because everything I've seen in social media that he's written indicates to me someone who's hurting really, really badly. And you know what? As a leader, I hurt sometimes. And often, I would say, don't go anywhere near social media when you're really hurting badly. I don't know why people do it, honestly. And see, one of the problems, Craig, with something like, these communications have all been written.
Yeah.
So what we're doing, we're reading words. Honestly, I've always said to my staff, never use email or social media to convey how you feel. It's impossible, because, in this kind of communication, there needs to be body language. You need to be able to see the emotional state of people, and so on. When you just read the written word, it is so easy for the intended receiver to get it wrong. You see, because communication is not all that effective when it's by written word only. It needs to be accompanied by body language, by
tonality,
intonation of the voice. What we're doing here.
Yeah.
You see, it's very different to the written word. So, I would just counsel people, don't write it, because you can't actually convey how you feel, how you really feel about a situation. And it's very difficult to communicate your heart to people. I feel intensely sad for the whole of the Hillsong movement, and not just because of this, but there are other issues as well. But if I can say anything to leaders today, right now, today, this is what I would say: don't take on too wide a span of control. You've got to trust people to take on some role. You've got to delegate. That means you've got to give some people authority and responsibility. And in my view, Brian should have headed up the church, and he shouldn't have been chairing all these boards, but he should have had maybe weekly, fortnightly, monthly meetings with the chairs of all the boards to whom he delegated. And I think that they wouldn't have done the same job that he would. Sure. Those of us who are a bit perfectionists, we don't believe anybody can do as good as us. But you know what? We've got to let go. We've got to trust. And this is all part of empowering our people as leaders, because as you and I have often discussed, leadership is not just about influence, it's also about empowerment.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that answers the question, Craig, but
no, it's really good.
It's a pretty difficult situation, no doubt about it.
I really like because what you're saying is that, so what I'm talking about is that text message, right? that text message.
Yeah.
And then what you're saying is that was just a symptom of
Absolutely.
like this deep, like you have to be very broken to get to that point to, I suppose, actually going back to one of the early points, like justifying, vindicating ourselves. He obviously felt like the only way he could justify himself by now was to go public with this negative attack, and it's sad. And I suppose for me, it reminds me of a strategy that we talk about, which is the three S's of leadership, is being able to categorize where people are in leadership. I'll go through them quickly. Obviously, we spend a whole week teaching this stuff, but first there's the spectators, right? So when Jesus was walking around, there was a big crowd of spectators that would just come to check out what he was doing. And so we as leaders will always have spectators coming and just judging and just kind of checking us out to see what we're doing. Then you've got the society, right? The society are the people that are like so, for example, the disciples, there was, about roughly 500 of them that would follow Jesus around at times or whatever, that they were this group of people that like, yeah, I'm bought in, like this is, I'm into this. And Jesus obviously spoke to them and communicated to them very differently. Then you've got the squad, which is the disciples. Now, they were the people that lived and ate and did absolutely everything and learned from Jesus. And Jesus spoke to all of those groups differently, right? He corrected the disciples and he was real with them, but he only spoke parables to the spectators, right? And so it's kind of like that thing of like, we're airing our dirty laundry to people that should be almost in our squad, but we're airing it to the spectators, and the spectators don't understand. Jesus says, I speak to them in parables because they have ears, but they just don't hear. And that's the problem. You air something where it shouldn't be aired, and people that don't understand will misinterpret it. You are giving them license, you're giving them ammunition to misinterpret something because you're only giving them one piece of the puzzle. But there's actually one last thing, and I said there's three S's, but there's actually a bonus S. And this is what I believe, going on to your point about where he found himself, is we need a select few of people that we can confide in. I've got my board, I've got yourself, I've got the other directors on the board, that you guys know everything about me. No one else knows all those things. I confide all my deepest, darkest challenges with you so that you know what we're going through. Now, I don't air those problems in public because there's the right places to do it. Jesus did the same. When he went to cry in the garden, who did he take with him? Peter, James, and John, his select few, and so they were the ones that kind of were the select few that he took around with him everywhere. And so I think that we as leaders really miss that, especially charismatic leaders, especially in the church. We're kind of called to this larger than life, and I'm on a pedestal, not because we put ourselves on a pedestal, but because our congregations put us on pedestals, or it's kind of like the way, unfortunately, it's been had. And we, like you said, like we're put in this place of we're meant to be infallible, whereas I feel like we are more fallible and we need to be more vulnerable, but we need to be more vulnerable with the right people, because I trust everything with you, and I know you're not going to gossip about me, and you're not going to share it with someone else. You're not going to go and, not only that, is I know that you're not going to use it against me. You're going to use it for me. You're going to help me grow as a person. And I don't believe anyone can lead effectively if they don't have those select few people around them that they can confide in, genuinely and authentically. Otherwise, you get people posting dirty laundry because they they're needing to prove themselves.
Look, I agree with you. I think that those principles that we see in the way Jesus conducted his ministry, they're important for all of us in leadership. We will have a fairly wide circle of people whom we influence. I mentioned the importance of empowerment before. The circle whom we empower is going to be a much smaller circle. So they will be, if I'm a CEO, they're going to be all the deputy CEOs, so your chief information officer, your chief people officer, and so on and so forth. And then we do need a few who have intimate knowledge of who we are and of our history, our experience, our aspirations. They will know what the dark side of our leadership is. That's the title of a book which is worth reading. And you mentioned actually that, the personality traits that fit you as a leader, they can be on the downside as well. So if you're a charismatic leader, that's a great thing and lots of people will want to follow you, but that can also lead to your downfall if you come to believe yourself too much,
Yes.
So yes, I do think that you need one or two people who love you dearly, and this is a really important aspect of the whole issue of neighbor love. We need to know that we have a few people who love us enough to take us aside and to tell us the truth, but who also love us enough to keep our secrets, as it were. I think that's really, really important. The other thing too is we really do need to surround ourselves by people who are honest. And if I can just relate an anecdote, I was approached by someone in a congregation once to write a reference. They were about to go to court because they'd done something a bit silly. And I said to this person, now you do realise that I'm going to say in my reference what I've said to you, which was, you're an idiot. And I explained why that person was an idiot. And I wrote it in the reference. Now, as it were, he got off. He got off on the charge. But I think that was because, I'd been honest with him and he recognised it. He was an idiot. He did something which was just plain stupid. And there were perhaps some reasons in his background and so on, which I outlined in detail in the letter that I wrote to the court. But I did say, he's an idiot. I've told him, and he recognises that. And you see, I think that was one of the things that persuaded the court to just let him go, as it were, with a pretty stern warning. And look, he's an upstanding citizen now, lovely guy. He's a snake catcher, among other things, and I actually had him around to my house just the other day because we had a snake.
Not metaphorical snake catcher.
This was a
physical.
real snake. This was non-venomous, but it was a snake nevertheless, and I'd prefer not to have it in my yard. But look, you need to have people who love you enough to be open and honest with you, but you don't need too many of them.
No.
And as I said, the circle of people whom you're directly empowering, that's going to be much smaller. So that's roughly equivalent to the 12 disciples. And we know that Jesus was empowering them because he called them together and he taught them and he prayed for them. And as you say, he virtually lived with them. They traveled together, they ate together, slept together, and so on. They did life together, in other words. And so I think it is a good model. And look, if you're in an evangelical or Pentecostal church, or if you're a business entrepreneur, you own a business, you've got to be very, very careful that you don't come to believe that you are the person everyone else believes you are.
No, that's very true.
Take on that sort of full mantle of leadership without actually, laying some of it down for your own good ultimately.
We should aspire to what they believe we are, but not believe that we are that.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
So going back to
what we should aspire to is to be more like Christ every day, to become more and more Christ-like.
Convicted. I forgot the Sunday school answer. Yes, you are 100% correct, Dr. Rod. 100% correct.
Well, I'm a pastor. What can you expect?
That's why you're my advisor. That's why you're here to keep me in check. So one last point on this Brian Houston situation actually goes back to kind of what you mentioned before, is when we are in the public eye, and you're 100% correct that, well, number one, we've chosen to be in the spotlight, but also the reason why we have the success we have, the influence we have or whatever, is because we're in the spotlight. So we can't shirk that when it doesn't suit us. I'm thinking about, obviously, like I said, we communicate to each of those groups differently, and we give each of those groups, we give the spectators a different bit of information to what we give the society, to what we give the squad, to what we give the select few. Obviously, not lying, but you give relevant information to each. But I was just thinking that I think that the timing of it is important as well. Obviously, we can't leave too much of a void, because then gossip ensues and conspiracies and everything like that. But I feel like maybe a mistake that Pastor Brian Houston made in this post, and obviously he realized it because he removed it soon after, is we need to share things to the public, to our audience, to the people we're leading, but we can't do it from a place. We can't do it from a place of emotion. And we can't do it because I believe that when we're sharing stuff, and if we haven't dealt with it ourselves, if we're still damaged and hurt by it, then it's going to come out in that. No matter how much we try to polish it, that hurt is going to come out in it. How do you feel that balance is to find that place of, I'm still hurting, but I need to share. How do I share something that I'm hurt by without it being without being heartless, but still without being a wreck,
Yeah, look, it's pretty tough, and it's so easy for us as observers on the sideline, of course, because we're not in the thick of it. But look, a degree of honesty is, I think, necessary and good for us. But you don't necessarily need to go beyond saying, look, I really do feel hurt because of these circumstances. So, I've given so much of my life to ABC. I'm no longer able to do that. In the case we're talking about, the partner in the whole enterprise has also now been exited. We don't know how much of her own will was involved in that, judging by some of the subsequent events. We just don't know for sure. But I think acknowledge there's hurt, acknowledge that the essential source of the hurt is that you're no longer able to continue building what you believe God gave you to build with. So I think acknowledge the fact that there is emotion involved, but be careful not to allow the emotion to determine how you behave, in the public arena. It is pretty difficult, Craig. When we're making an exit for reasons other than we believe God has called us into something different, He's moving us on towards our destiny, it's very easy then to be overwhelmed by the hurt. And in every case where I've exited from a particular situation, look, honestly, there have been mixed feelings. The blessing for me is that I believe God has always opened a door for me at the time of that exit. In the case of Brian, it was an unplanned exit, and he may have been talking about it with his board for some period of time, but it came suddenly, so there was really no time to prepare for the next phase as he moved on towards his own destiny. And then, of course, with Bobby losing her possession there, that kind of multiplies that whole sense of hurt and displacement even. So, these things are pretty difficult. And you won't actually find a chapter or a Bible verse which says, this is how you do it every time.
Yeah.
So you need also, I think, to take it to the Lord, knowing that he longs to hear us pour out our hearts. And if you're not the type of person who's totally open with God, it's actually okay to tell God you're hurting, you're disappointed. It's actually okay to raise your fists and say to God, I don't like this.
Yeah.
Because he's okay to take it.
Yeah.
He's okay. Yeah. He wants you to be real with him. And that's often, that's a bit cathartic as well. You can deal with a lot of issues by taking them to the real God with whom you have a real relationship through Jesus Christ, by the agency of the Holy Spirit who is with us. The Holy Spirit is not an idea. The Holy Spirit is not out there somewhere. The Holy Spirit is in us, with us, 24/7, and we can actually have a direct conversation. And I would really encourage folk to do that. I've done it. I've certainly let God know how I've felt about a lot of situations, that's for sure.
Hey, you just watched an excerpt from our On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you'd like to see the full episodes, check out our YouTube channel and consider subscribing.